Number one Ibble Dibble here.
Have you ever heard the saying, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything? I remember hearing it years ago and nodding along thinking, that makes sense to me. Just stand for something. Stand for something good. But not everyone sees it that way, especially when it comes to women. Or maybe it was more of stand for something. Why can't she just sit down and, you know the rest?
I want to talk about this adage. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything actually doesn't make sense. Think about it. Being a vegetarian against animal cruelty doesn't make you less likely to fall into drug addiction. Being a political protester doesn't make you less likely to fall for a taxi scam as a tourist. This saying is about 100 years old and can only be understood in its original context. It was originally used in Methodist churches to remind people to come back for service the next week, and the original wording was, "It's easier to fall for anything than to stand for something," which makes a great deal more sense. It's hard to get your family up and dressed for church on Sunday morning, but doing so will help protect you against moral ills. Its first appearance in print was in a 1926 Ohio newspaper, Sermonogram, as they called it, and the other pastors considered it so pithy that it spread around to Presbyterian, Baptist, and Anglican churches as well, usually as the name of the week's sermon. It was common to see newspaper blurbs like, "The Presbyterian Church Reverend Theodore DeVries minister. Church service at 10:30. Sermon topic. If we don't stand for something, we fall for anything. Church school at 11:40. The first person to use the current wording outside the church context, at least in print, was a World War II Army doctor in a January 1945 issue of a since closed scientific journal called Mental Hygiene, who wrote, quote, "So many of these boys have only a very hazy idea of the real issues of the war. About all they see is going back to the good old days. This is a dangerous state. If they don't stand for something, they will fall for anything. They need to realize that we are fighting two wars, the war of arms and the war of ideas. That other war of which the war of arms is one phase." End quote. This catchier wording, which is very rhetorically powerful because of the strong contrast between stand and fall, yet easily manipulated to mean literally whatever you want or even nothing at all when taken out of context, was immediately seized upon by Hollywood stars, with Irene Dunne, who, by the way, I am not knocking here. She was a real Hollywood star with a much more meaningful legacy of charity work than Meghan, using it as a sort of meaningless but energizing gong at the end of some speeches she gave starting in May 1946. All of this to say, Meghan doesn't understand the history of the adage, its original meaning, or why it's been considered tired and toothless since around the 1970s. So it's very weird for her to choose as an opener, unless she thinks she's going along with the Hollywood status quo, which is to say as little as possible in the most impactful way possible, to try to appeal to everyone and not lose money. And I think that's why this whole podcast is Meghan discussing very outdated issues with very successful people she wants to network with. Pure selfishness. Meghan stands for herself. She's not going to trouble her pretty little head with an actual war of ideas. She's not going to fall into the time suck and money pit of actually helping people. And if you have a problem with her all talk, no action form of activism, it's obviously because you're against empowered women using their voices and you just want them to sit down and shut up. Next, Meghan discusses the 1906 coining of the word suffragette by a Daily Mail reporter with accuracy as a sexist dig against female suffragists. But being Meghan, she has to be self-centered, weird, and stuck in the past about it.
In 1906, this term, this word suffragette, which is a fraught term, was created by a journalist for a well-known UK publication, or shall I say tabloid. And she says the name of this notorious publication, which still exists, but I'm not going to elevate them by mentioning it here. In this piece, she says that the journalist was, quote, making fun of the more militant suffragists in the UK, and so he used the diminutive et to belittle them. When I read this, I found it so interesting, and it made me wonder, why is female activism so audacious to some? Why is it perceived as, how dare she? And why do some feel the need to make a woman with big opinions feel small?
Meghan, the Daily Mail was founded in 1896 and has remained the UK's highest circulation daily ever since. It preceded you, it will outlive you. You cannot elevate or demote the Daily Mail the way they've elevated and demoted you, like it or not. Also, I think you really do have the answer to your big thought-provoking question.
1906, 1906, 1906, 1906.
If the word suffragette requires a history lesson, it's no longer a fraught term. Didn't we learn the power of reclaiming unflattering language last week on the bitch episode? Have you opened up a newspaper lately, Meghan? Or what about these new technologies? TV, the internet. It's pretty easy to see that the police are brutalizing men and women protesters equally. Nothing cute about it. When it comes to things like definitions and idioms, I often wonder if Meghan is ignorant and careless, ignoring and or disrespecting the fact checker she hired, or maliciously cherry-picking to suit her narrative. Most of the time, I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt and say she's stupid. But today I'm falling on the side of malicious. Also, everyone says I shouldn't give Meghan advice, but she needs to go back to the elocution teacher. She paid good money to get a voice that sounds more like mine and less like hers.
1 out of every 3 commercials is going to say something that's going to hurt somebody's feelings.
Because over the last couple of episodes, she's revealed she has a verbal tic. Do you hear it? It's this sound, typically used by a public speaker to buy time, but occasionally used to punctuate their speech.
I started to notice this almost default eye roll. She'd just sit down and you know the rest. And she says the name of this notorious publication.
The guiltiest example I've seen is Chelsea Clinton.
I'm here as a proud American, a proud Democrat, a proud mother, and
During Hillary's campaign, but I believe has since been trained out of it. Her first guest this episode is Ilana Glazer, a comedian I actually like. She claims that Ilana has something to do with activism simply by writing a comedy show from the prerogative of a 20-something getting by type woman in Brooklyn with, I would say, an average level of feminist behavior for her demographic.
She is literally layering in activism at its finest.
No, Meghan, writing for a TV show is not activism.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, people are paying you to use the free public charging station?
So what? All the great male entrepreneurs do it, okay? They take something that already exists, claim it was their idea, throw in some fancy furniture, and charge double for it.
I only played this clip because I wanted to talk about the concept mentioned. There are a couple YouTube channels,
But I'm not going to elevate them by mentioning it here.
who simply download the Archetypes podcast in full and then upload it to YouTube to monetize it and make money. I want to be super clear, Archetypes is free. It's free to everyone. If you want to hear the whole episode, all you have to do is sign up for a Spotify free trial. You only have to give your email address. You don't have to give your credit card. They're not going to auto renew you. You don't have to sweat it. Let me know, should I set up a side channel where I simply upload all of the episodes in full for comparison purposes? So I, your beloved commenter, makes money off of it rather than a rando who sets up a million YouTube channels and uploads absolutely nothing original, solely other people's work. Once they've realized through a little research that they're not going to get hit with a copyright claim, let me know. Let me know if you'd rather listen to my monetized free download of the Archetypes podcast rather than somebody else's here on YouTube. Okay, I'm trying to cut these off around 10 minutes because that's when YouTube tells me people click away. So BRB with the follow-ups. Toodles! Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.